Volume 4 C16. Demiurge put himself beyond the sight of his master as swiftly as he could, but when he was out of range of sight, or sound, or scent, when he was sure that Lord Dines could not be aware even if he had knowledge of it, Demiurge watched them go. A lesser being would not have known why the dragon's words had touched a nerve. But Lord Albert, my maker, desired a being of boundless ability, serene in evil to better serve their needs. Demiurge had never once cursed his nature, never once taken anything but pleasure in his own supreme intellect. But watching Lord Dines disappear into the distance, it was an aching existential horror, as if he watched his own maker vanish again, and knowing that wasn't what he was seeing made it no better. How one's own nature and knowledge created an inventive creature of torture, and now that nature was turned upon himself, he forced his body to turn around, to show his back to the vanished dot of his lord and the new servant, and yet he looked over his shoulder, even held a hand out, shaking in the dark like one of the prey he'd acquired for scroll production. I can imagine 10,000 ways to succeed, why can't I stop imagining 100,000 ways each plan could fail? Demiurge gritted his teeth and lowered his hand, then turned away in full, ceasing to look backward into the dark that did not bar his crystalline demonic eyes. Ahead of him lay his destination, his certainty was absolute. Pompous beings place themselves at the center of their world, so he will be in the center where the capital lies. It takes a supreme being for the world to form around them on its own. He thought with smug pleasure. The walk was made more pleasant by that thought, and for the time being his grim thoughts and fears could be left behind. Nothing about the depths of the shadowy mountain troubled the archdevil. The silent buildings did not have the charm of terror-filled screams of pain. But what lesser beings would have called eerie silence was grave-like, and brought some comfort to the heart of the archdevil in its own peculiar way. Between the functional square stone buildings carved into the rock itself lay the widest road, and it was that road which Demiurge followed. There were fewer glowstones in this area than in most, which diminished the admiration Demiurge had for the innovative species' work. Their leaders were quick to flee. They had enough time to take the glowstones from this area. They may be useful craftsmen, but perhaps the Quagga will make better troops once tamed. The plan was already shaping in the archdevil's mind. Each little facet of the stone world which surrounded him filled him with more ideas. The cool, stale air had a faint whistle to it as he passed by the more narrow alleyways. Left alone, it would howl endlessly, the only scream in a dead city devoid of life. That in and of itself was a curiosity. No rats, no bats, none of the creatures I would expect in a place like this. I think it very likely that the dragons have the Quagga act as pest control. That or the Quagga eat such creatures. He turned up his nose at the thought of eating such filthy creatures. I'll feed them better while I am breaking them. He promised himself that as he spied the distant great double doors which towered over many buildings. Aspect of the devil, invisible tempter, thief of souls, Demiurge used his skills and hopped atop the walls. It was almost a skipping motion, hopping from building to building until he reached his destination. The sound of snoring, rough and not that far away, hit his ears. Good, they're here. Demiurge thought and stopped to appreciate the place he was about to break into. A massive building with a curious-looking mechanical lock on the front. There was a great double door which he had to crane back to see the top of. Overcompensating for something, are we, dwarves? He wondered and laughed a little, adding the noise of his amusement to the whispering stale breeze. He took a scroll from out of his pocket dimension, and used it. Perfect thief, he said to activate it. Blue fire consumed the hovering paper, and for a few minutes the archdevil had high-level thief skills stacked on top of the middling ones added by his imp class. The lock, already more interesting than problematic, was suddenly more like a cube meant to teach a child about shapes by matching objects to holes to fill it. His fingers worked it for a moment, it clicked, and the great treasures of the dwarves, guarded like a jealous lord's harem, were laid bare to him. He penetrated the untouched space, parting the door and walking within to see what treasures he could find. The archdevil expected to be disappointed, and he was. There were piles of gold, and copious sacred objects which faintly glowed with power. But not a single thing fitting for more than a middling Yggdrasil player. On the whole, he looked at this treasury as little better than a water closet. Absurd. To guard so strongly, things of such little value, and so little of it, other than their runecraft's unique properties, there is not much of anything worth bothering my master about. A bold statement to make if he had not seen Nazarick, for around the room there were stands full of armor of orichalcum, and adamantite. There were enchanted swords, spears, and axes. There were chests overflowing with coins of gold and silver. Wealth enough for any 10 common kings. But nothing of great worth in his eyes. At least they will make nice presents for Pandora's actor. He's not particular about what magical objects he touches as long as they're magical and he can touch them. There was one thing of note. Runecraft, the thing his master coveted. There were plenty of well-made rune-crafted materials, and that was eye-catching because his master said it was. He could also see the one value it truly held above all else, even as a yet-to-be properly developed art. No resources, only time. What a stupid world, to not realize how valuable this is. If this is one of the talents, and runecraft-skilled dwarves are rare, perhaps we can breed more of them? Perhaps we can select them for their power? He wondered while picking up a long straight sword which had 3 runes emblazoned on it. A praise magic item. He cast the spell, and found it was enchanted for bleeding, burning, and pain. His opinion of the dwarves went up another notch. Sadistic. I like it. A little amateurish, but to make a weapon out of pain itself wasn't a bad idea. Summon evil Lord of Wrath. The smell of sulfur briefly filled the air around him as his summoned servant appeared. A being of stone and flame, nearly 9 meters tall with sharp dark stone fingers and flaming wings springing from his back, this was one of his most powerful servants. He was broad-shouldered, had a sharp-featured jaw, which when opened, revealed a maw of hellfire. From above his burning eyes 4 horns jutted and curved back behind his head. His thick, powerful pair of legs were as large around as a human body, and a miasma of evil surrounded him like an aura. But he was not enough. Aspect of the devil, dominance of the puppet master. Briefly the evil Lord of Wrath's eyes lost all sense of intelligence, the bright burning orange fires within seemed to fade. But then it burned bright again as Demiurge took control. He moved the body around a little within the treasury, knocking over a few objects, coins, gems, the clattering and tumbling of armor. He chuckled a bit more. The Lord of Wrath's body was stronger than his own, even if it was of lower level. It was purpose-built for battle, so it felt quite good to dominate and control the creature. His sharp ears pricked up a bit. There was a noise in the distance. Something heard his laughter and the noise of the treasury. A few of the more delicate objects, such as cloth tapestries, seemed to have broken or torn. It doesn't matter, there is nothing here that is a match for the creation of a supreme being. Demiurge thought, and with his mood improved, his tail danced about behind him, the metallic sheen occasionally glinting in the light of one of the few remaining glowstones which illuminated the interior and glinted off the many shinies present in the long rectangular room. What are you? A voice came from out of sight. You don't sound or smell like either a quagga or a dwarf. It's been a long time since I've seen a human. But unless they've changed, you don't smell like one of those either. It was a rough voice, crude, frosty. The claws of the beast scraped over stone, a lashing tail hit something of stone, the sound of a home becoming rubble echoed off the mountain interior. Demiurge sat down in the lotus position with his legs crossed and his arms calmly resting on his thighs, fingers touching one another where his hands came close to each other, and shut his eyes. His control was complete. The Lord of Wrath emerged from the treasury, and his booming, burning voice answered back. I am Yaldabaoth, Demon Emperor, the hidden one of the Dwarven treasury. I have been asleep for a very, very long time, and now. A pause hung in the air. I've woken up. Volume 4C17. I hope my lord doesn't mind, but I've taken you by a somewhat longer route. We're close to the chasm now. There's a secret route that leads toward the Dwarf Kingdom's capital and lets us avoid the usual paths that the dwarves guard. I thought you'd like to avoid the usual fuss. Hegemel explained and kept his head lowered as he spoke. The dwarves don't guard a route to their capital? Ainz half exclaimed. The notion was as absurd as an unguarded guild base. They seem to have forgotten it exists. I found a reference to it in one of their old books, but the Quagga don't know about it, so they and the dwarves have been slugging things out elsewhere as a result. You never informed your father? Ainz asked, his dark eyebrow raised behind the mask. Ainz could not read the faces of dragons yet, but the voice of the dragon sounded much like a dejected child, and the dragon would not meet his face, though Hegemel curled his long neck around to look backward at his rider. The dwarves make books. I never wanted them destroyed. Hegemel replied with a morose air. All I want to do is read. My father thinks it's stupid to be obsessed with anything but strength. Being strong is important. Ainz responded tacitly. I know, my lord, Heginmal said as he trotted onward. His pace slowed as they spoke, though Ainz still rocked about atop the beast in a slow and steady rhythm. But life is terrible as it is, and books helped me get away from that. I can't help but want to be inside those pages instead. Ainz felt his affection meter shoot up several times over as Heginmal unknowingly described the reason Ainz himself began playing Yggdrasil. That probably sounds foolish, Heginmal mumbled, but Ainz laid a hand on the dragon's flank. No. No, it doesn't. Nothing lasts forever, and if you pass away having lived happily, are you worse off than if you pursued power and a life you didn't want and died unhappy as a result? Ainz asked, and Heginmal's eyes widened like saucers. He brought his head up closer to his master's masked face. You're right. You are a truly wise king, Heginmal said with reverence, which was rewarded with Ainz's white-gloved hand patting his head. I'm patting a dragon's head, he cried inside his mind. His gamer happiness engaged to new heights. For the moment all stress vanished, even to the point that the aching wish for his friends to see this moment didn't ruin it. Heginmal didn't seem to mind. He returned to watching the way ahead. If anything, there was a spring to his step that had him bobbing his head back and forth quite contentedly. A king who understands me. My luck has turned. The young dragon thought with joy in his heart that filled him with energy of the sort he'd never had in his life. You were saying before? Ainz prompted, and that finally brought Heginmal back to reality again. Oh, yes, my lord. You'll see the long chasm. It's so deep it seems to go all the way down to the center of the world. Has nobody ever ventured to its depths? Ainz asked. Heginmal shook his head and neck with vigor enough that it was remarkable it didn't break. No, if there is any record of that, my lord, the dwarves have lost it. There have been many expeditions to the bottom, but nobody has ever returned alive. I've read about many hypotheses about why, but nothing going down there ever comes back up. It was just then that the chasm came into view, a great wide crag, like glass that had something dropped on it. The jagged crag was a bowshot's distance across, and if the interior seemed dark before, then the chasm made the Understone realm appear to be high noon on a clear day in Riestais by comparison. Darker than pitch, the inky depths were like an ocean painted black. His explorer spirit grabbed hold of Ainz and would not let go. Stop, Ainz whispered. Heginmal obeyed and Ainz looked back at the hidden route. In retrospect, it was little more than a broken-down cave hidden by rocks that jutted out at just the right angles to hide it on either side, and far away from any area anyone had any reason to travel. But the interesting thing was the chasm itself. He approached the abyss, his shoes slapping lightly on the stone, but there was nothing to stop the small echo other than the interior walls. My lord, you shouldn't go too close, you might fall, Heginmal said in a small voice. I can use flight magic, Ainz said, but raised Heginmal a notch in his loyalty meter for the concern. He stopped at the edge nonetheless and stared down into the abyss. The great crag held Ainz's full focus. He took out a lamp from his dimensional storage, a worthless trash item from his beginning days, lit the candle within, and tossed it down the supermassive hole. He watched. The light pulsed back and forth, in and out from the central wick, the fire bouncing off the nearest wall, and shrinking more and more into the depths. He listened with care, even holding his hand beside his ear and leaning over the edge with his head tilted to one side. There was nothing, no sound. Nothing. If even I can't hear the noise down there, how far down must it go? Ainz knew enough about geology from one of his guildmates to know that this was a truly ancient place even by geological standards. This may very well be as old as the mountain itself, and if things form at the same pace here as in my world, then this chasm may be millions of years old. His breathing picked up a pace at the sheer awe-inspiring moment of looking into the deepest depths to the invisible heart at the bottom of the world. One of the books I read said that it is bad luck to look into the abyss. They say if you look long enough, the abyss looks back at you. Heginmal approached with several hesitant steps. If it does, I will make it blink first. My friends and I know what it is to walk an abyss, beautiful, majestic, deadly. And make it known, make it ours, Ainz said, and straightened up. I want to go down there, and do it again. My lord. Heginmal shivered and shook his head. That would be too dangerous to do without an escort that can help you, and I'm useless for that. He eeped out in a very undragon-like way, and to that Ainz had to laugh. How old is he, to speak of something like that? How truly strong? Heginmal asked himself, but could not bring himself to vocalize it. What lies beyond the mask? He dared not ask the question when the king approached him again. Ainz patted Heginmal's shaking blue-scaled shoulder. No, I know that. But what an adventure it will be one day, Ainz said, not even realizing he'd already made the promise to venture into its depths until he had remounted Heginmal and they were well on their way to the city again. When he did realize what he'd said, his conviction crystallized. Yes, exploring this is what my friends would want to do. And me too. How can I pass this up? He asked, knowing he definitely would not. Heginmal, however, politely and subtly, put them well away from the edge of the deep gorge as they rode on, and the dwarven city finally came into view. Heginmal, fly. We want to give a powerful impression here. Ainz gave the order, and the mount did not even think to question it. He spread his wings, flapped several times, they bobbed up and down in the air, and then began to go forward. His blue tail battered about in the air at his back, drawing them ever closer to the distant city walls. The light of glowstones laid into the walls came into view, going from little dots to a brighter, but still soft white hue. The dwarves on the walls went from invisible in the distance, to tiny dots, to moving people as they came into focus. And as he drew closer, they too finally caught sight of the dragon soaring toward their walls. Before Ainz could even shout toward them, all hell broke loose upon the walls. Panic seized their souls, fear consumed their hearts. And the dwarves cried out for salvation to whatever mountain god they worshipped, their stubby bodies rushing to and fro, while a massive bell somewhere out of view called all the city to face what they believed was a coming terror. Perhaps I should have remained on the ground, Ainz thought, and with a gentle push of his hand, he gave a subtle order. At the very slight pressure, Heginmal took the hint and began their descent. Volume 4 C18. Are you one of my servants? My memory. Fuzzy still, Yaldabaoth. Silence followed. I am Olisur Dark, ruler of the frost dragons and future master of this mountain. The dragon bellowed back, outraged by the suggestion he might be a servant. The sound of his coming picked up, the crashing became like rolling thunder over the sky of stone. Yaldabaoth waited, his hand on his head, he waited for the prey to come to him. When the frost dragon appeared, he towered over the demon, his scales a dirty icy shade, his wings on his back beat at the air to create a hurricane-like wind. And Yaldabaoth was unmoved. Yes. I remember. The depths. I came from the depths. I ruled this mountain until the rune scholar trapped me. Yaldabaoth shook with wrath, but now I am free. He began to laugh, striking a melodramatic pose, his wings out and arms stretched out toward the stone above. Free again. But my army? His arms dropped down. Where is my army? Olisur Dark cocked his head, never having seen a demon before. He wasn't sure what they smelled like, looked like, or tasted like. But the creature under his eyes was clearly quite a bit larger than any other two-legged figure he'd ever seen. And a vague memory of hearing demons being described as fiery beings stirred in his mind. If he says he's a demon, why argue with him? It's as good a label as any. The frost dragon thought, it wouldn't matter anyway, I will crush it. Father, what is it? His children and wives had, driven by their own curiosity at the unfamiliar smell, come to see for themselves. I must find my army. They too were confined by the great sage. Tell me, worm. Yaldabaoth looked up at the frost dragon. Have you seen my Armageddon evil? Bring it to me, and you can be my mount rather than my rug. It should be here somewhere in the depths. Olisur Dark was torn between curiosity and raw, unbridled fury. He reacted instinctively, raking out the claws of his foreleg toward the insect that had dared call him a mount. Insect, he roared, and Yaldabaoth turned into a shredded pile of burning stone. Or should have. Instead, pain lanced up Olisur Dark's body when the hand of the demon caught him just beyond the base of the claw and squeezed. Impudent whelp, Yaldabaoth roared, yanked forward, then bringing his other arm across his body, he swung it out as Olisur Dark was yanked forward, and kept his promise to Heginmal. He cracked the dragon across the jaw with the back of his hand and shattered the bone therein, sending the dragon toppling over with a thunderous crash into the stone. Pain lanced through Olisur Dark's body as the burning hot stone hand struck his scales and shattered the bones they protected. His mates and children looked on in horror, they scrambled back with the instinctive fear of the strong. I have to get back up. Hurt this thing. Kill this overgrown bug. I asked you a question, big blue worm. Where is my Armageddon evil? And he looked around seemingly confused. We are in a dwarven city, but where are the dwarves? Where are their quagga? I owe them both great pain. Yaldabaoth turned his back on the dragon, seemingly indifferent while the would-be ruler of dragonkind struggled to rise again. Fearing what might happen if the demon went unanswered, one of the others spoke up, dwarves. They were driven off by the quagga. We know nothing of the scholar or the sage. Yaldabaoth looked behind him, his face was fixed, but his eyes reflected curiosity. The rune scholar, the inventor of that hateful magic, runecraft. And the great sage. The first great caster. How can you be so ignorant? It was an almost academic question, like a teacher baffled at the stupidity of a student. What year is it? Yaldabaoth demanded. What about my enemy, the source of sages, the kingdom of Nazarick? What about them? The dragons, as baffled as they were full of fear, traded expressions of confusion. Yaldabaoth stared at them as if waiting for the fog of stupidity to lift. Olisar Dark was on his feet then, and he told Yaldabaoth about it by way of a gust of frost breath towards the fiery demon. Yaldabaoth whirled on the dragon as it came close. Apu Entol. Ioliodak. Olisar Dark shouted incomprehensibly thanks to his broken jaw which hung limp and useless. To prove his boldness and strength, and by coincidence his foolishness, the towering frost dragon approached, his great height allowing him to look down on the flaming demon below as he hit the creature with everything he had. Yaldabaoth, however, did not linger. He shot forward faster than the dragon's eyes could see, his fist striking into Olisar Dark's leg at the knee and shattering it like glass. The dragon howled despite the broken jaw as he toppled. You're bigger than your power, worm. Yaldabaoth wasted no time. He stepped on the dragon's leg and walked over top of him, making his way under the horrified gaze of the would-be ruler of the dragon's family until he reached the tail. He then grabbed it at the tip, and began to swing him about like a club. Stones shattered, homes became rubble, the thundering noise from before became like that of a raging storm that would never stop, swinging the dragon around, back and forth, shattering Olisar Dark's face into splinters from the sheer force of it all. Olisar Dark struggled and flailed with his limbs, but the force of the swing kept his entire body stretched out taut. The world of stone spun around him as he grew dizzy, his vision blurred as blow after blow against the rock broke more and more of his bones. He lost sight in one eye as an outcropping corner caught it and tore the eyeball in its socket. Lightning agony brought a scream of agony as the remaining good eye caught sight of the blur as the demon laughed with sadistic bliss, smashing bones within the giant body as if they were mere twigs. The rest of his clan scattered while the father and founder of the band became a club to be used against them. You do make a good club. Yaldabaoth remarked in passing. Blue blood sprayed about, cast off like raindrops to stain the area around him. It was too much for the clan, and without his strength to compel their unity. His 3 mates and all their children were broken from their stupor and fled, leaving him to his fate. Yaldabaoth, seemingly bored with the use of the dragon as a club, grabbed the tip of the tail with both hands, spun him around a few more times, and flung Olisar Dark toward the stone above. The dragon body proved to be quite enduring, and between his innate toughness and the force of the throw, he shattered the mountain open. His broken body sailing far off into the distant night, Yaldabaoth stopped and looked into the great deep. No! It can't be, he bellowed out. Why are those stars there? Why? The bellow carried off to be heard by the retreating dragon clan, and only when they were well out of sight and sound, did Demiurge pause his act as Yaldabaoth to congratulate himself. That will do. I'm sure my lord will be pleased with my opening act.